Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
All right, everybody. Peace. Welcome to the GSMC College Football Podcast Show, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As you guys know, I'm Casuan Cottle, and I was debating throughout the entire day about how I really want to start this show. How do I really want to start this show? Because there's a lot of interesting topics I want to talk about today. And normally I like to add a monologue or a little bit of a soliloquy to kind of set up the frame the topic of discussion for today. But, I think it's best today that we kind of just get right into it. The second half of our segment of our show today, we're going to be discussing whether LSU is in trouble going into the season. Whether they have things to worry about after their, for lack of better words, shellacking the defeat that they took against Florida State over the weekend. Whether they have things to be concerned about. But the thing that's on everyone's mind right now, the thing that we're going to start this show off with is quite frankly, the game of the week. Colorado's emphatic and resounding and dominant victory over number 17 ranked TCU. Before we get started, guys, be sure to subscribe, hit that subscribe button, and also hit that like button as well, so you can stay tuned and up to date for all of our latest content and shows as well. But the biggest story of the week is Colorado's victory over the TCU Horned Frogs. Bright Saturday afternoon, and I think everyone except for the 85 players and coaching and members of the coaching staff of Colorado thought that TCU was going to win on Saturday. But obviously Colorado had other plans. Deion Sanders had other plans. Shedeur Sanders had other plans. Travis Hunter had other plans. The entire Colorado football team had other plans. Colorado defeated TCU by a score of 45-42. And for those who watched the game, understand that game was, the score isn't indicative of how close, of how wide of a margin the game actually was. Watching the game, Colorado was actually extremely dominant over the course of the game. The reason the score was so close was because Colorado, quite frankly, missed out on a lot of opportunities, missed out on a lot of scores. There's one that went right through Travis Hunter's hands into the in the end zone off a beautiful pass by Shedeur Sanders. And then Xavier Weaver dropped a phenomenal pass as well that likely would have taken him to the end zone as well. So watching the game wasn't a 3-score game. It was, Colorado's much more dominant than that. However, I think the biggest takeaway from this game is the state of affairs and the transition and the direction that college football is heading towards. All throughout the offseason, the media and quite frankly other teams in college football were giving Deion Sanders a lot of flack, and they were criticizing him and they were questioning his methods and whether the way he was developing, the way he was creating this program at Colorado was going to work or not. And the moment I saw back in April that 45 players transferred out of Colorado and they brought in 85 players, that told me all I needed to know about what direction Colorado was going in this season, and that they were going to be on the up and up. They would be serious contenders, not for a national championship, but at least for the Pac-12. No doubt about it. And I say that because when you're establishing culture in any sport, whether it be football or basketball, at the collegiate program, it takes a head coach a minimum of 5 years to establish culture. And I say that because you need 1 year to get out, or to let the players from the old regime, the old culture, leave and transfer. You need another year to bring in your culture, your guys, the guys that you think represent your culture. You need a third year to develop those guys, to let them develop. You need a fourth year to actually now hold an accountability for winning. And then a fifth year is how you really gauge in how you sort of measure whether this coach is good enough to lead your program. So whenever athletic directors and universities hire new coaches for whatever sport, they need a minimum of 5 years to really establish culture. And the reason that is because it's so important to have the right personnel into your culture. And when you have a solid culture, strong foundation, and an actual standard that you want to carry, that is going to naturally eliminate a lot of people. So when you hold yourself to a high standard and you have a certain idea of what you want, you're naturally going to be more exclusive than the average individual. And that's why culture is so important, because we need to really weed out people who aren't going to hold to our standard and keep the people that can hold our standard. And so that's why it's always a big exodus process when establishing culture, because now you need to really eliminate everyone that can't hold that standard and follow that culture. And people always question whether when freshmen come in, was the program too hard, or was coach too hard on you, or is the program going to suffer from players leaving? And I always have this thought process right here that whenever players leave because they can't fit the standard, they can't follow your standard, your culture, your program automatically gets better. Your program and culture automatically gets better when people leave because they can't follow your standard. Automatically. Because what happens is you weed out those people, and now you make room for players that can follow that culture and can follow that standard. And that's why you have to be extremely, extremely meticulous and nuanced and detailed in establishing culture, because that is your foundation. That's your core foundation when it comes to coaching. Not necessarily winning. Winning is a caveat of your culture, but culture is how you carry yourself on a day-to-day. What your standard is, not just for winning, but in life in general. So very rarely do you see coaches in any sport that don't preach about a strong foundation on a personal level, on a level beyond sports. Because sports in essence is just a microcosm for life. It's a physical representation of life. And when we establish our culture and our standard for ourselves, it transfers over into sports. And that's why, for example, Roy Williams, one of the biggest things in his culture was at UNC and at Kansas as well, was accountability. And that's what Deion Sanders has brought over here to Colorado, accountability. Not focusing on winning, but on the process, something Nick Saban at Alabama talks about quite frequently. Accountability, embracing the process, winning the day. And Deion Sanders talked about that as well when he was coaching at Jackson State. He told his players that just focus on winning the day. Just focus on winning the day and focus on being the best version of yourself for that day. And You know, Deion Sanders was comfortable with getting flack, getting criticism from media, from other coaches and other universities, because he knew that his standard was so non-pareil and so meticulous and thought out that the results would show. It would show eventually, whether it's in the first game of the season or in year 5. The results will show. And this victory for Colorado right here is simply a representation of what happens when you buy into culture and you're willing to eliminate any and everybody that doesn't fit your culture and doesn't fit the path that you're on. And that's the biggest takeaway that people need to get from Colorado's victory over TCU, is that you have to do what's necessary to eliminate any and every circumstance or distraction, people that doesn't fit your path, doesn't fit your focus, and doesn't align with your culture. And Deion Sanders did that. He did that. And this victory over TCU is what that represents. Now, there are a couple points real quick points I want to make, is that Shedeur Sanders, his son, might have put himself into Heisman contention with his performance today. Is he better than Caleb Williams? I don't know. Is he better than Jaden Daniels? Is he better than Jordan Travis? Up for debate. But it's no question that Shedeur Sanders is one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And Travis Hunter will be a Heisman candidate, if not this year, next year, for sure. And I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but one thing I heard that people were concerned about is Colorado going to be too much on a high going up into the game against Nebraska. One thing I know about Deion Sanders is that he is cool, level-headed, composed all times of the day, and I think that translates over to his players as well. If you notice, when you watch the post-game presser and you watch the post-game interviews with the players, they didn't seem too high. They were level, steady, composed, with the right understanding, the right thought process, the right outlook on moving forward to the next game. And those are things you want to see. Those are good positive signs that you want to see from a team. And this right here is the perfect embodiment and representation of what happens when you buy into culture, regardless of what the circumstances may allow. And that's why it's beautiful to see Colorado's victory over TCU. I hate I didn't want to call it an upset, but because it's not. Colorado's just extremely dominant over TCU. But one upset that did occur was Duke's defeat over Clemson, over number 9 Clemson. And there's really not much to say about this, except that, you know, when you start to see the chinks in the armor before a dynasty falls. You know, when the Lakers lost to the Pistons in the 2004 finals, that's when people first said, okay, oh well, this dynasty might be over. You know, this might be done. You know, or when the Golden State Warriors lost to the Toronto Raptors in the 2019 NBA Finals, people started saying, oh, this dynasty might fall off. Or when Alabama, last year lost to LSU, people said, oh, well, this dynasty might be done. There's always a very particular point in a dynasty where you say, okay, this thing might be done. And will this loss against Duke, be Clemson's chink in the armor where things slowly start to go down? You can argue that they've been on this trajectory for the past couple of years with the carousel coaching staff that they've lost. Brett Venables going to Oklahoma, their offensive coordinator leaving as well. there's been a huge turnover within that coaching staff, which causes lack of stability, which affects your culture. And 3 turnovers in the red zone by Clemson, one of them leading to scoring opportunities for Duke. It tells me that your talent level no longer makes up for your mistakes, and that's what that game represents. And will this game be the beginning of the end for Clemson's reign as one of the best teams in the country? That will be the thing to look for moving forward. And it'll be interesting to see where Dabo goes with this. See the comments he made that he was extremely. This is the weirdest game he had ever been a part of. So, like I said, it'll be interesting to see moving forward. But I wanted to make that clear distinction that one was an upset, the other wasn't. Colorado defeating TCU wasn't an upset. By no stretch of the imagination was that an upset. Duke beating Clemson, that's an upset. But I think it's more representation of the beginning to end for Clemson. But guys, that being said, in our next segment, we're going to talk about, is LSU in trouble? Do they have anything to worry about after the defeat they took against Florida State? So guys, stick around. We'll be right back. All right, buddy. Welcome back. If you missed our last segment, we talked about the importance of establishing culture and how the victory over the Colorado's victory over TCU represents the perfect embodiment of what it means to establish culture. And what Deion Sanders has done is exactly that. He's actually stepped ahead in the process. But in this segment, I want to talk about whether LSU is in trouble after this display they put on this weekend in their loss against Florida State. But before we get into it, guys, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well, stay up to date on all the newest content from the GSMC College Football Podcast. LSU, Florida State, Sunday night. It was, so just to clarify, I actually predicted LSU would defeat Florida State by a score of 31-17. But in hindsight, that was it was the worst, probably one of the worst predictions I've ever made as an analyst. But aside from the actual game, there's a little cause for concern with LSU's performance. So LSU lost by a score of 24-45 against Florida State. Jaden Daniels of LSU threw for 347 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Jaden Daniels was the leading rusher as well for LSU with 64 yards and 15 carries. The leading running back for LSU, Josh Williams, only had 44 yards and 4 carries. So the offense was quite stagnant. Over the course of the game. And going to halftime, the score was 17-14 LSU. And initially, I thought that it was just a matter of getting into a rhythm for LSU, and they would make adjustments going into the second half, and they would start to pull away. Because I didn't think that Florida State would have the offensive firepower to keep up with LSU. I didn't think the defensive interior for Florida State will be able to get to the quarterback, will be able to get to Jaden Daniels fast enough. And I thought the experience of the LSU receivers would come into play against the younger secondary that Florida State has. But the biggest key to the victory for Florida State was not necessarily the offense, but the pressure that they were able to put on the offensive line at LSU. They ended up with 4 sacks, and throughout the entire second half, Jaden Daniels looked flustered, and it was because of that pressure that Florida State's interior put on. There's a number of sequences where Jaden Daniels would have to go through his progression quicker than expected, and he had to scramble out of the pocket, and that led to a lot of missed throws, like I said, sacks, and missed opportunities for the offense. However, the biggest factor, aside from the interior of Florida State's defense, was their quarterback, was Jordan Travis. I mean, read off his stats. He 23 of 31, 342 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. It was I mean, Keon Coleman, his leading receiver, had 9 receptions, 122 yards, 3 touchdowns. Jaheim Bell had a touchdown as well. It was a great display for Jordan Travis. And going into this game, before I actually had Jaden Daniels on my Heisman list, but it looks like I chose the wrong quarterback for this game. It's safe to say that Jordan Travis is probably going to be in the Heisman contention as well if they can keep this up. However, there is a little cause for concern with how good Florida State actually is, because LSU lost so many pieces on the defensive end from last season. whether it's from the draft, from the transfer portal. So their interior wasn't as strong as it was last year. And that allowed Jordan Travis more time to make reads and go into progression and make deep throws, which causes LSU's secondary, which is also weak as well, to have to play coverage longer than they normally would, because the interior, the D-line of LSU wasn't able to create pressure. So now Jordan Travis has more time to sit back and make those reads. So there's a lot of pressure on the secondary of LSU now because of that. And that's why you saw so many instances where it looked like it was busted coverage. It looked like the Florida State receivers were well past the DBs of LSU, but really it's just a matter of the D-line, the interior of LSU, not creating enough pressure on Florida State. And, excuse me, how will Florida State be able to fare going further into the season? Granted, they play in the ACC, and if you're basing everything off of just last week, Florida State looks like the best team in the ACC right now, especially after what Duke did to Clemson. And it's really an indicator of the trouble that LSU may face moving forward. And I say that because LSU was missing their starting running back due to academic issues. However, the same running back missed all of 2021 and all of 2022 due to academic reasons as well. And as a former college athlete, that is an issue. That rings a lot of bells in my head, because now it tells me he's had these issues all throughout the summer semester, and now things aren't fixed, and now it's the fall semester. Will he ever be able to play? And that's another blow to LSU's offense, and it puts a lot more pressure now on Jaden Daniels. And now, if I'm a D coordinator in the SEC, I'm saying to myself, okay, we can go man, we can go complete man coverage against LSU. One, because the offensive firepower, especially at the receiver and running back position, is not there. So I trust my DBs to match up against the receivers. But also, I can blitz as well, because I've seen that the offensive line for LSU is not as strong as people thought it was. So I can create interior pressure for LSU, forcing Jaden Daniels to get out the pocket. I leave 2 spies or 1 spy, and I go man coverage. And that is going to be the formula for how teams beat LSU going into next season, going further along into the season. And now the question is going to be, can Jaden Daniels perform well enough and perform to a high enough expectation to where he can overcome those obstacles and put LSU on his back? Can he have a Cam Newton-esque season? Can he have a Joe Burrow-esque season minus the talent that those 2 quarterbacks had? And that will be the question moving forward, and as the season goes along. But one saving grace, or one positive, one silver lining that LSU has, is that last year in the opener against Florida State, they struggled as well, and they lost by 1 point. And LSU found their rhythm as the season went along last year. And that can be the silver lining for LSU coming out of this game. However, these were glaring issues that LSU presented throughout this game, which is why I do believe LSU is in trouble going into the rest of the season, and quite frankly going into SEC play. Because if LSU performs against Alabama and against these other teams in the SEC the way they perform against Florida State, it's not going to be close, quite frankly. It's not going to be close as well. And we're talking about an SEC team, or SEC conference that is always loaded. It's extremely top heavy, but the top talent in the SEC, especially the SEC West, is extremely good. I mean, there's Texas A&M, Mississippi State, there's Ole Miss, Alabama. Is LSU going to be able to hang in there with those teams in the SEC West? We saw Alabama's D-line, how they looked, how their offensive line looked. They looked like in mid-season form. So will LSU be able to fix these glaring issues that they have? I don't think so, because the issues they have cannot be fixed during the season. The way to fix the issues they have is by bringing in more talent, whether that be players from the transfer portal or recruits coming in for next season. But it will be interesting to see how LSU moves forward with this. They are in trouble, though. They are indeed in trouble going into the season, moving forward. However, Florida State has exceeded my expectations and has, and quite frankly, surprised me with how they looked. I will be more impressed once they get into ACC play and seeing how they perform against their conference opponents. But for right now, I do believe that LSU is in trouble and that Florida State will be possibly legitimate title contenders, depending on how they fare. But that is what I've seen. So that's what I was able to come to, and that's what I saw throughout this game on Sunday. But guys, that is all we have for our show today. Once again, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that like button as well to stay tuned and up to date on all the latest content from GSMC. We'll be back again tomorrow at the same time, guys, to discuss some more college football action. Continue to stay safe, be vigilant, make smart decisions, and until next time, guys, peace.